One of the most important tropes that shapes the last 30 years in Western civilization history is the emergence of terror as an act of war. Terror has been utilized by many nations or many militant groups that see another nation as being some sort of viable threat to that own militant group's way of life or system of influence. And so, particularly, we've seen the rise of terror by Islamic nations or Islamic militant groups to, in some way, impact the lives of Americans and Christians. In particular, in some ways, there has been a worldview ideological battle that has used terror as a way to, in some way, upset and create anxiety and fear for people. And so we have a bunch of different events that take place. Particularly, we think of the terror event of 9/11, where on September 11th, 2001, two planes flew into the World Trade Center, and those two buildings collapsed, killing thousands of people, including those that were passengers on the flight. Also, a plane impacted the Pentagon as well, and also a flight crashed also towards another target. Supposedly, the Capitol building is one of the suspected targets of this terrorist attack. Since Pearl Harbor, one would say that 9/11 has been the most significant domestic event that has impacted society. Now, one would add into that a trifecta and include COVID-19 as one of the most globalizing effect for America. Alongside of the terrorist attack of 9/11, you also have the London bombings on July 7th in 2005, and also the Paris terror attacks on the 13th of November 2015. These two events demonstrate the globalized Western civilization tension with the Middle East that exist. The London bombings and the terror attacks in Paris were both also affected by terrorists in the Middle East. Uh, all of that being said, this isn't to create some sort of xenophobia against Islam. There are millions, I would say, of people who practice Islam in a very peaceful manner, and that these terrorist attacks are executed by a minority and by a fringe margin within the Islamic worldview. Nonetheless, the combination of these different events has caused a reaction. As a result of 9/11 in 2001, there was the battle or the war in Afghan and also the war in Iraq. As a result of London and Paris, there has been continuous significant control over the power and the influence that nations have in the Middle East, and there has been a very careful eye towards the relationship of Israel with Palestine in the Middle East. And there has been much tension in the past couple years, in particular, towards diplomatic relationships between America and Palestine and Israel, and the dance between having a ongoing, long, healthy relationship with Israel for the Americans, and having strong support for Israel, and also nuancing its way in which it looks at Palestine as well in a more diplomatic fashion. Now, not only has there been geopolitical terror that has taken place, there's also domestic terror that has to be recognized. And so it's important to point out the trend of the domestic school shootings that has only increased. Some of this has to do with the pressures that students experience in their student environment, and also the marginalization of particular students who feel solitude or feel left out and are then acting out violently in some sort of way. And so you have the Columbine shooting that was the real marker to see this trend that's taking place that's become stronger in particularly in America. A part of this has to do with gun laws. Britain and Paris and other Western European countries have a much stricter rule on gun control. And so America has made it possible for young individuals to get a hold of guns and to use them. On the flip side, there's also more enforcement of law upon school districts, and so you have police departments by school district popping up into existence over the course of the last 20 years as a result of the rise of school shootings as well. And then a terrible event. We can talk about two. We can talk about last year, Notre Dame burning down, and over the last couple years, they have been in the process of trying to restore Notre Dame, being a very significant ancient landmark that was a symbol of religiosity, of faith, particularly of the Catholic faith, but I think even Protestants would say that there is some sort of recognition of the spiritual, pious influence that that piece of architecture actually represents, and so that had a large effect upon all of the uh, faith-believing individuals that would say that Christianity has really shaped their sense of being and how they live their lives today. Along with that, we would also talk about COVID-19 and how that terrible uh, pandemic has had a global effect upon all of us in the circumstances that we are currently in today. And so we should recognize that we are living in a moment in which there's going to be global recession, there's global shifts that are going to take place having to do with best practices for businesses that have concern for health and ways to isolate or to decrease the possibility of infections. And then also there is going to be ways in which technology is leveraged in new ways. Obviously, we are seeing this take place as you watch this lecture. This is not the traditional way in which education has taken place. And then let's also talk about technology. Uh, with the rise of the gaming industry since the 1980s, you have all sorts of new gaming technologies that have been produced. You have the Nintendo Entertainment System, Sega Genesis, the Sony PlayStation, the Xbox. Over the course of the timeline in which each of these were developed, you also have online gaming that is virtual in nature where there are gaming communities that are evolved around CPU gaming systems. Uh, as a way of leisure or pleasure, you have many people dialing into these communities and creating social network and social engagement over the course of the last 20 years. And so this becomes the key diversionary or leisurely technology that is employed. With the rise of the smartphone, and so we should also talk about telecommunication technology. In 1998, you have the Nokia phone that gives you the ability of doing texting and having a. This is the point where you have the more or less universalization of the mobile phone, and so teens and adults are able to call one another and contact one another on a week-to-week, daily basis at a moment's notice. But then in 2007, you have the creation of the smartphone. Now, this then interrelates to the gaming industry because with the smartphone, you have the production of all sorts of different apps. In fact, people are able to make entire fortunes off of the development of one app that then becomes mass used by individuals who use that app to better or make more convenience or efficiency in their life. But then there's also gaming apps like Candy Crush and other gaming apps that are being used at a level of social networking and social interaction, and also for people who are commuting using public commute. They're using this gaming technology. Likewise, they're also able to watch Netflix or watch other television shows via Amazon Prime or Hulu or any of the other uh, Disney Plus technology that is allowing them to stream uh, uh, as much technology or as many shows as they wish to do at a given time. And so the smartphone has completely revolutionized and changed our lives so that we have a pocket phone, a pocket computer with us wherever we go. We can access all of our data files and we can share them. We can share PDFs. We can answer email and we respond to email as if we had our laptop computer with us as well. And so I know I'm jumping back and forth here, but we have the rise of the computer and of the internet that takes place, having a personal desktop in 1990, having the mouse in the 1990s as well, having the development of AOL Internet in 1991, and then also the full constellation of 24 satellites for global positioning satellites, making things like Google, mapping, navigation for going to and from a place, being able to have location spotting so that you can find your devices or you can be able to access particular retail technology because they're able to locate you and tell you where to go or what is going to be the retailer that is closest or nearest to you. All of these things have in some ways made the world smaller, globalized the world in many ways, and allowed us to be able to connect to one another and do business and be able to ship and pick up technology and new products in various ways. You can choose to have an Amazon locker. You can choose to have products shipped to you within 1 or 2 days because of the massive warehouses, the massive server warehouses that also exist that store all of this data and information. All of this has really made the world much smaller. And so the technological aspect has really played into the globalization of the world. That really kind of brings us up to today as best as I can bring us into looking at some major tropes that are really important. I hope you've enjoyed this class on Western European history, and I hope that it's been a rewarding experience for you. I would encourage you to think more about the ways in which technology has globalized the world. This could be a really good essay response. It would be a very simple essay response for Unit 3 for you because of the fact that you utilize and you have lived through the development of technology, and it's a very native aspect for your life. And so you can probably account for the ways in which you've used apps to have convenience and efficiency in your life in many ways. And also it's been used to perhaps be a storehouse for information for you so that you don't have to remember as much You don't have to remember phone numbers. You don't have to remember how to get to places as much. Uh, have a great semester, and it's been